Well, good morning, Washington, D.C. That is where Joey Hood is joining us from. Welcome on this very historic day for American-Russian relations. And I know that you're in charge of the Near East affairs, but we will touch on that as well as other things relating to this region and beyond. And I would want to welcome also in the afternoon, good afternoon to the Foreign Minister of Finland from Helsinki. Welcome. It's good to have you with us. It's the first time that you join us, and it's such a great pleasure. And good afternoon, Moscow, Fyodor Lukyanov. Hello, Fyodor Lukyanov. You are our guest for the second time, or maybe third, and because you are so special to us, and because we love what you share with us with all the information and analysis, deep analysis you give us. Thank you so much for joining. We will have also the Foreign Minister of Sudan, who is coming in, but she's having some technical issues. So she's now in Doha. So good afternoon, Doha, where the Foreign Minister of Sudan, Mariam al-Sadiq is joining us. This is our 37th e-policy circle of Beirut Institute Summit in Abu Dhabi. And it's a great conversation, global conversation, where we learn from each other. And I will learn a lot from all of you today. And I so look forward to the engaged conversation. After the 4 minutes that I ask each of you to be strict to, and we will start with the Foreign Minister, Pekka Haavisto. 4 minutes to you, sir. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Madam Chair Raghida, and nice to be online with you, and best greeting from warm Helsinki, and first of all, congratulations for the excellent seminar and really timely topic. And I'm thinking now particularly the meeting in Geneva and Putin-Biden meeting going on today. Of course, we have been following at a very excited mood and very detailed way the Biden's visit to Europe. I think it's a good signal that he stays around 1 week in Europe. There's a G5 summit. There has been the bilaterals with the European Union and NATO contacts, and now today the Russia-US discussion. And of course, the signal that the US is giving to Europe is now that they are not only back to Europe, US-Europe relations, but also globally, back to the global agenda, including their involvement in the UN, including the involvement in the Paris climate agreement and so forth. This is a fresh wind that I think that is now coming. I was in the Arctic Council meeting in Reykjavik, where it was possible to meet both with the Secretary Blinken and also Foreign Minister Lavrov, and already there it was obvious that issues like climate and others are now definitely in the very much in the agenda of US, and of course the climate envoy John Kerry and others are doing excellent work. So we are waiting quite a lot of the forthcoming EU-US cooperation, and of course for us it's very important that there is a direct dialogue between Russia and US as well, and waiting for the results. Another issue on the international agenda that I would like to mention, of course, are the JCPOA talks with Iran in Vienna. We think that it was worth of keeping the JCPOA alive during these years, even if it has been criticized quite a lot, because now we see a momentum that maybe is bringing some interesting results. Of course, we are aware that elections in Iran will be soon. And then actually my third point, and which I have been personally also involved, is the situation in Ethiopia, Tigray. I have had a mandate from the High Representative Josep Borrell to work for European Union on this issue. I have 2 trips to the region, of course, looking at the human rights situation, but also looking at the Renaissance Dam issue, the GERD issue, which is a very, very delicate issue between Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. And while it's helping Ethiopia in producing electricity and so forth, might also help Sudan to a certain extent. It poses a risk to water quantity quality issues in Egypt, and it's very important that we as international community understand all the all the arguments from all the parties and try our best to solve this problem. And I think the GERD issue, the dam issue, solving the dam issue would be one of the key issues to get down the disputes and tensions in the region. Of course, on other issues, the current situation in Tigray is very devastating, and I visited the Mekele hospital. The violence against women and all this is terrible, what you can see. And there, I think we should really address also the role of Eritrea, not only by condemning what they have been doing, but also look how to get Eritrea out of this conflict, and also what would be the future of the country, what would be the peace dividends for Eritrea in the future if the peace will remain in the region. These are some of my thoughts, and thank you for this opportunity.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Minister Pekka Haavisto. Now we are luckily joined properly with the Foreign Minister of Sudan. Ahlan wa sahlan. Mariam, thank you very much for joining us. So good afternoon. You are in Doha. And,
yes, I am.
And we look forward to hearing 4 minutes from you. Anything that you bring us to the table, bring us fresh news, fresh ideas, whatever you wish, but we will have right now 4 minutes to you. Please, madam, you go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Ms. Raghida, for inviting me to participate in your serious forum, e-policy circles, stability or redefined, and who authors the future. This is, and also with this outstanding group, stability itself, Ms. Raghida, as I'm sure you know, cannot be redefined if we don't agree what constitutes stability itself, or stable system that is very much influenced by our desires, priorities, prejudices, which are well wrapped in scientific words for many times. But the good thing, humanity developed good amount of experience and knowledge to make on environmental threats of the ozone, globalization, of disease, not only as COVID, migration of the poor and oppressed, and open communication. So the concept of responsibility to protect as new concept for sovereignty and the human security, all are very important things we can build on how to define stability. Also, for the question who authors the future, it cannot be taken away from the question who already wrote the history, who is still in monuments, in museums, celebrating a history that is still of very painful aspect to many parts of the world. So, but let me go to the topic of my address, which I chose, and I thank His Excellency. He just addressed some of it, which is the GERD. I just took it from one perspective: is the competition over water resources in the world, which is very important and is getting meager by the day because of the many developments, environmental and the humanity and population and so on. Is it the only alternative to go into conflicts, or there is alternatives? And GERD is a case in point. To ask the question, GERD, could it be stabilizing or destabilizing factor? It's of course it's both. It can be stabilizing or destabilizing. Ms. Raghida, this GERD is not a new idea. It has been long in the thought, even in the colonizers, to control the water of the Nile by controlling its push, the Blue Nile. So, but it actually started since 2011, and Sudan has been all the time supportive of the GERD, because not only because it has benefits for Sudan and for Ethiopia, and no harm to Egypt, but also because it's the right of Ethiopia. The thing is, what happened, we could reach a very important agreement or principles in 2015, is built on the general stance of international law, that equitable and reasonable utilization of water for all countries, and the obligation not to cause significant harm, and notification and exchange of data and information, along with peaceful settlement of the dispute and other important things. To To cut a long 10 years story short, last year, by an active mediation of US and the administration of President Trump, they grouped the three countries could reach important developments vis-a-vis the technical issues, and but with outstanding legal issues, very important legal issues. Even the technical were not addressed because Ethiopia at the time said it has to go to its elections, which didn't take place up till now. Supposedly to take in few days, in 21st of this month. But the thing is, this what brought the serious development. Sudan, for the first time, got harmed, directly harmed by the first filling, which was not agreed upon. And Ethiopia up till now insisting to go to a second filling. This is here the issue. We are for Ethiopia to do whatever investment, and we are supportive of the GERD because it has benefit for Sudan. But even these benefits have many alternatives, as you mentioned. We can support even the GERD with the wind and the sun power. And for the first time, Ethiopia addressed a new issue. It is as if your hegemony. It is for water allocation. Water allocation already, as known by everybody, is an obsolete international issue. It has been overridden by sharing of benefits, which we all acknowledge. The thing is now, there is an important mediation by the African Union. We, the Sudanese and the Egyptians, called for it to be reinforced by the international community, that is the United Nations, the European Union, and the United States, as well as South Africa, as added by Ethiopia. And this is now here where we are. The issue of water. And we have already in Africa very important experiences in the Niger Basin and Senegal Basin. It has been durable and sustainable for the last 40 or 50 years for the Senegal one. It is very important, we believe, for the world to take this as a casing point, because water, conflict over water, if it will not increase, it will not decrease. The world cannot keep silent or cannot turn away from addressing this important on principles. For us, we very much we are rest with the international principles as in the Treaty of the United Nations of 1997. But for us, we are very much committed, and we will go along for having negotiation and having by peaceful means and diplomatic means. That's why we already addressed the United Nations Security Council, and we are addressing our friends in the European Union and the US and in the African Union and the Arab League to support the issue of handling this water resource as something that is very important for everybody. It's not an issue only for Sudan and Ethiopia and Egypt, and it is very well in the issue of having. Yes, and I'm just on Raghida. It is something for everybody to address, and it's part of how we can author the future.
Madam Minister, this is supposed to be only 4 minutes, and quite honestly, what happened is that we lost the electricity, so we really have got to stop here and go to the other guests and then have a conversation. So forgive me, but I have to stop you with your permission.
I'm done. Yeah. I'm done. Thank you.
And also apologies, as it's happened already. We lost electricity. Welcome to Lebanon. It's very unfortunate. But if this happens, you go on, as was the good luck of the minister. She went on, and I was unable to get back in. But I want to go to Joey Hood now. Please, 4 minutes, help me out, because I want a conversation out of this. Thank you, Joey Hood.
Okay, thank you, Raghida. It's a pleasure to be part of such a distinguished panel. Greetings to the foreign ministers and to Mr. Lukyanov as well. I'd like to begin my part of the discussion today with an overview of the Biden administration's approach to diplomacy, and specifically in the Middle East. As you've heard 100 times now from his visit to Europe, President Biden is declaring that America is back. He is reinvigorating American diplomacy, rebuilding alliances with our partners, and trying to help citizens around the world realize their aspirations for a better future. Our engagement in the Middle East is anchored in those values. So building partnerships focused on shared economic prosperity and values that bring respect and dignity to all people, we think leads to innovation and opportunity, which is a basis for long-term regional stability. It's in our interest as America to advance policies that end conflict, fight corruption, promote human rights, and create jobs, not just in the region, but in the United States as well, while preserving our climate for future generations. That's why we're going to collaborate as much as we can with our friends in the Middle East to solve those regional and global challenges. And you've already seen some important progress. Last month, for example, diplomacy, very quiet diplomacy, helped bring about a ceasefire in Gaza after just 11 days. Secretary Blinken's visit to the region laid the foundation for our efforts to improve the lives of Israelis and Palestinians and to try to mobilize international support to rebuild. We believe Palestinians and Israelis deserve equal measures of freedom, security, dignity, and prosperity. And that's what we're going to be working toward. Next week, I'll be joining Secretary Blinken in Berlin to rally international support behind Libya's interim government of national unity as it moves toward elections later this year. And we're going to continue to support UN-led efforts to end the conflicts and provide a lot of humanitarian support to Syria and to Yemen. All of these efforts would be challenging under normal circumstances, but they're made all the more difficult by the pandemic and the geopolitical challenge that is presented by China's efforts to upend and change the rules-based international order. COVID has revealed to all of us that global threats like pandemics and climate change don't respect borders. So multilateral institutions like the WHO and sustained cooperation among all of us is going to remain our best tools. We can't let momentary flaws stand in the way of a concerted global effort. To demonstrate that democracies can deliver, the United States government has donated $2 billion and pledged an additional $2 billion to the COVAX facility. And we've already donated 25 million vaccine doses. We expect to donate a total of 80 million of US manufactured vaccines by the end of June, this month. That's like in the next 2 weeks. From our initial vaccine donation, we're dividing our support between COVAX and bilateral support to countries in need, which in the Middle East will include the West Bank and Gaza, Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, and Yemen. On top of all of that, President Biden also recently announced that we're going to donate another 500 million doses to COVAX. That's leadership. And that's only the beginning. We're going to continue to donate surplus supply as it becomes available in the United States. On this, I commend Finland's leadership because Finland understands, as we do, that none of us is going to be safe until we're all safe. Over the long run, as China and other countries work to bend international institutions to their worldview, we need to do our best to ensure that these institutions instead remain grounded in the values, the principles, and the rules of the road that have made our shared progress possible for so many decades. We're going to defend that international rules-based order against those who seek to undermine it. We're going to work on renewing our democratic values right here at home in the United States and abroad, particularly in the Middle East. And we're going to push back on malign activity by our adversaries some of which I've described here. That advances a vision for a world order, I think, that offers the best possible future for the people of America and the Middle East and around the world. I look forward to the discussion.
So do I. Thank you so very much. And when you get back into the discussion, I want to, as they say, pick a bone with you, because you have not mentioned Lebanon in any capacity. And I was thinking that maybe you have decided to write off Lebanon. I hope not. So anyway, I'll give you the chance to speak about that, unless you want to say quickly why you didn't mention Lebanon at all. You mentioned Libya, you mentioned Yemen, you mentioned
Sure.
Jordan, everything. You mentioned everything except the poor little Lebanon that is cracking up. And
no, I probably should have put it in the category of humanitarian assistance along with Syria and Yemen, because as long as Lebanon's leaders decide that they're not going to make any changes, there's really nothing more that we as the international community can do except to make sure that the poor, suffering Lebanese people can be fed and receive medicine. But real change is going to have to come from the Lebanese leaders themselves. And I don't know what's going to motivate them.
Well, we'll discuss that during the exchange. Fyodor Lukyanov, I'm sorry it took so long getting to you, but I will have to right now insist 4 minutes to you, unless you get lucky and lose electricity. So please go ahead, but make it 4 minutes. You're the man who's watching what's happening in Geneva. If the world is watching what's happening in Geneva, American Russian relations right under the spotlight with the President Putin summit taking place right now. Please go ahead, 4 minutes to you, Fyodor Lukyanov.
Thank you very much, Raghida, and I thank to all of distinguished participants. Being the only non-official here, I feel better and worse at the same time, because I need to express my personal views, and that's always a problem because you need to have them. Yes, indeed, what was mentioned by distinguished ministers and acting assistant secretary, they described very eloquently different international problems and conflicts which we are facing. I think the main challenge which the whole mankind and the whole political community in the world are facing is basically erosion, if not disappearance, of many of previous institutions which used to guarantee a certain kind of cooperation between different countries in the previous era. Many of those institutions were created in the second half of 20th century. Some of them extended into 21st century. New institutions we tried at least to establish recently, but to be frank, when we live in such a in a time of such a profound change, of course we cannot be sure that institutions of previous periods will be as efficient as they were intended to be. And I think what we see worldwide is exactly this, that even very well established organizations and structures, they don't work in the way they were supposed to work. So, and this is the general problem. It's not a problem for Russia, US, Finland, Sudan, France, or who else. That's the problem for international environment, which is changing. In this context, the summit, which has been mentioned here several times between Putin and Biden in Geneva, on the one hand, it's a very traditional institution actually, because since maybe 1950s, when the post Second World War international system has been established, the relationship between Moscow and Washington has been the most important one, and we got used to perceive those summits as something really extraordinary, especially at times of hostility and low level of mutual understanding. Indeed, it's very important because both countries are unique with their capacity to physically destroy each other and actually to physically destroy the whole world. So in this regard, Russia and the United States remain two superpowers. At the same time, to be very frank, I'm a little bit surprised by the level of excitement and even exaltation vis-a-vis this meeting between Vladimir Putin and Joseph Biden. Yes, it's important, but in many comments, it seems like now something will happen which will completely change the course of the world. It's not the case. And certainly it's much better to have this meeting, especially given the very, very bad relationship between Russia and the United States in recent years. But at the same time, we should not expect too much. So I think that the main challenge which both leaders are facing is, it might sound quite pessimistic, but I think that we need to turn unsound and irrationally bad relationship in orderly bad relationship. And if they manage that, that will be fine.
Thank you very much. I have a quick question to you. So if this is going to be the summit of no breakthroughs, no negotiations, as you said, don't expect too much. Has it been a good thing for President Putin? Because as you made it a point to point out, and I don't know if others will still agree with you, you're speaking of Russia as a superpower like the United States. This have been the case during the Soviet Union. Would it be this is the benefit for President Putin from this summit, that he launched Russia from the point of view of Russia as a superpower equal to the United States? Fyodor?
When I say superpower, I mean only just one single parameter of that, the nuclear potential. Of course, in other regards, Russia is not Soviet Union. And this meeting is important not because of anybody feeling super or hyper on something else. It's important because two countries really share responsibility for strategic stability in world affairs. And they need to talk about this. Unfortunately, at the Trump time, it was totally destroyed agenda. Now it's reviving.
Pekka Haavisto, do you think by President Biden going to the meeting in Geneva, to the summit with President Putin, do you think it's relevant and important and game changer that he's going there, employed, if you will, or empowered by being the spokesman of the West after his trip to Europe and all the meetings from the NATO summit to EU to other meetings? Do you think this is, again, the West telling the East, we're here to stay? And what would that mean in terms of Europe and the rest of the world? I mean, in terms of that relationship, the Russian and American relationship being looked at from the confrontation West and East. Go ahead, please.
Well, of course, what has happened already during Biden's visit now to Europe is this kind of strengthening transatlantic alliance. And if I just want to make one comment, that during the President Trump time, we saw developments where when US was glad that European Union was breaking, when the Brexit happened and so forth, giving the support to UK. And now actually the whole support to Brussels, the direct Brussels-Washington cooperation, this is something what we of course welcome very much in Europe. And I'm sure that President Biden has got a lot of good advices from other European counterparts on meeting with the Russians. Of course, there are disturbing elements. There is the Ukraine, there is the illegal occupation of Crimea, Eastern Ukraine conflict there. There is the Navalny and other human rights, civil space of the civil society. And I'm sure that Biden will not avoid these difficult topics. I'm sure about that. But at the same time, if you look where there's the New START agreement already agreed and continuing, Russia is chairing the Arctic Council next 2 years. Arctic issues very important for all of us. And actually, I can see in Russia also the developments to be serious on the climate change. Their infrastructure is collapsing in the Arctic areas when the permafrost is melting and so forth. I can see that being on the same page on these environmental issues could be one possibility.
Yeah, I mean, it would look to me that one of the red lines for President Putin would be, for example, that Ukraine becomes a member of the NATO alliance. And also if the Europeans, or the West, let me call it, putting both the US and Europe together, if you resort to more sanctions against Russia over Ukraine, what would this do to the relationship? After all, Russia is in the middle of Europe.
Well, I think we have been bound, of course, to react to both the Crimea-Ukraine situation and on Navalny and human rights issues. And of course, this is the basis of the sanctions. And sanctions can be lifted when things are improved according to the Minsk agreement and so forth. But at the same time, at least from the European Union, we have these 5 principles that there is possibility to cooperate with Russia, even in these circumstances, on those areas that I mentioned, whether it's environment, climate, people-to-people cooperation, and so forth. And I think it's very important we don't go to the trend that we isolate Russia from Europe. I think you are definitely right.
Joey Hood, people are speaking about this historic meeting as if something important, hugely important, is going to come out of it. But then when you hear US officials as well as Russian officials, they say, don't expect so much. What do you expect, Joey Hood, from this summit that you would call a good result?
Well, Raghida, I expect both leaders to get together and have a conversation, as has been laid out by some of my co-panelists here, that will identify the areas in which we can work together. And frankly, from the US perspective as well, I think President Putin will be hearing from President Biden about what behavior we find unacceptable and what we feel needs to change. But there are areas, particularly in the Middle East, where we can work together, such as Syria. The UN says that out of the 17 million people who still live in Syria, something like 11 million of those need urgent humanitarian assistance. Sending all of that assistance through Damascus alone is not possible because the government doesn't have the capacity or, frankly, sometimes the will to help all of those people. And so we need humanitarian corridors to remain open, not just in Bab al-Hawa from Turkey into the northwest, but also Bab al-Salam and Rabia that goes into the northeast, so that the UN agencies, largely funded by the United States and the European Union countries, can get in there with vital life-saving assistance. Those are areas in which Russia and the United States can work together to prove that there are some things that we can do together, even when we continue to have differences in other areas.
Yeah, but I want to follow up on this. I mean, Russia is very clear about its support of President Bashar al-Assad, his re-election, his rehabilitation in the League of Arab States, while the United States goes with the Caesars Act. And why do you want to cooperate with Russia when you have a completely different agenda, opposite agenda, and where you don't meet really on anything except the humanitarian, which is the job of the United Nations, as you correctly said, and other and Europe and etc. Where is this meeting of minds between President Biden and President Putin on the issue of Syria?
Well, if we can work together on the humanitarian aspect, maybe we can make progress on the political aspect as well. Because President Putin has been very clear many times over the years that he's not particularly dedicated to Bashar himself as a person, but he doesn't want to see more chaos in Syria overall. I think we share that goal of not wanting to see further chaos and suffering. And we think that the UN-led process through UN Security Council Resolution 2254 is the best way to do that. Establish a new constitution, establish a new government that is actually representative of its people, and then maybe we can see ways in which Russia's interests and the America's interests in Syria are both advanced through this political process, and we need Russia's support to make that happen. So far, they haven't really pushed Bashar, or they haven't demonstrated that they're capable of doing so, to make him seriously participate in this process. But we think it's possible, and we should work toward it. We should test Russia's ability to do that.
I want to get back to this issue together with Fyodor, and I want to talk about exactly the Syria, Iran, and Israel guarantees to Israel matter. Please, I want to get back to you, Lukyanov, but I need to go to Mariam al-Sadiq al-Mahdi and ask her about her own expectations from the summit between President Biden and President Putin. What are Sudan's expectations? What are your expectations? What do you care? What is it that you care about hearing from such a summit, Madam Minister?
Well, as you have been all discussing, this is an important summit because it is part of the issues that has been terrorizing not only Sudan, actually, many areas of our continent, because there is subtle, overt, sometimes implicit struggle or competition in the resources, in the relations in Africa. And this is, has been manifesting in many parts of our part, including Sudan itself and its ports in the Red Sea, as well as in Central Africa, in Chad, in Central Africa itself. So it has been very much in a heated way or in a confrontational way during the last president time, Trump, who has been also confronting the whole world and in a direct way. Any understanding vis-a-vis how to have a more or less confrontational policies with each other, more working together, more overt issues like the issue of the relations in the Middle East. It reflects in Africa, it reflects in the Middle East. As for them directly, because these superpowers, and of course, if we add in China as a very important superpower as well, with many competitions in the world, any reaching out or reaching into mutual understanding will put the rest of the world in a better position. And of course, we have now, as Africa, many initiatives, many important economical initiatives after COVID. So yeah, it could anything good is good for the rest of the world.
Yeah, I want to focus just a couple of minutes before I go back to the issues at hand that may be coming out, maybe being discussed at the summit right now. But I want to focus with you because I know you have this important issue that matters to you most. And I want to ask Pekka Haavisto, what have you been doing on behalf of Europe? Because I think you have been playing a special role, probably a very involved role in the conflict between Sudan, Ethiopia, and Egypt. There's been some new proposals by the Sudanese water minister about something transitional and temporary. And I was wondering if there are other efforts that you are displaying. What do you plan to do? Jeffrey Feltman is, of course, the envoy of the US on the issue of Horn Africa, and in particular on this issue. Can you share with us quickly, please, what are the chances right now of containing this conflict and how?
Well, first, it's important to say that we work very closely now with Jeff Feltman on the European side, and we are very much on the same page. And he had very interesting and successful trips also to the region. First point, of course, is that we agree on Ethiopia and internal developments for Ethiopia, that the human rights violations in Tigray has to be stopped. Eritrea has to withdraw from Tigray, and also the al-Fasaka conflict between Sudan and Ethiopia has to be solved in a peaceful manner. And this is very important. We are actually also engaging with the Gulf countries on this issue because they have a certain influence and they can support peaceful development in the region. Then on the Kurd issue, we see, of course, that there is this, what Mariam, you were referring, this second feeling, which very likely has to happen this summer because of the rainy season and so forth. And it's put certain risk to your power plants in Sudan, and there's a lot of questions by Egypt. And we have been stressing very much the sharing of the information at this moment and having this short-term agreement on the second filling, and then there's a need for this long-term agreement on how the dam should be operated so that it would be beneficial to each and everyone. We have doing actually this diplomatic work with Egypt, with Sudan, with Ethiopia on this and trying to support the African Union mediation as much as possible.
Which Gulf countries are involved in this, and how come it hasn't been successful? You've been trying, the African Unity has been trying, and everything falls apart. How dangerous is this issue, and which Gulf countries are helping or impeding your efforts?
It is, first of all, it is risky because of
it is the United Arab Emirates.
Sorry.
Sorry, I thought she's asking me. I thought, sorry.
Go ahead, Pekka Haavisto.
Okay, maybe very shortly. We have been, of course, seeing the very strong rhetoric of Egypt, and it's not helpful. It's very hostile. It's very warlike rhetoric, but this just stresses how important it is to come to the conclusion. And then on the Gulf countries, we have been particularly engaged with Saudi Arabia and Emirates, and of course, Emirates has been very helpful by inviting the water ministers to Abu Dhabi and so forth. And we would like to see even more cooperation with the Gulf countries on this issue. Back to you.
Yeah, Mariam, Sadiq, al-Mahdi, please, can you quickly give, you wanted to come in to say something about the role of the United Arab Emirates as being part of the...
I wanted to say that it is subsidiary and complementary to the African Union, but as mentioned by His Excellency Haavisto, with that, because there is strong relations between us, the Sudan, Ethiopia, and Egypt, and Emirates and the Saudis. So they are culminating on what is already agreed upon and to wrap it up in a quickly way. The important thing, as also you mentioned to a very important point, that in Sudan agreed can look into two-stage agreement. That is to agree first on the second filling and then later to the comprehensive one. Yeah. The Egyptians at the beginning were not agreeing, but they could see our point. But we have 4 conditions. The 4 conditions is that it must, the first, the comprehensive agreement should be not more than 6 months of the first agreement. The second thing is must be carried out in a robust mediation, also building on what is already agreed upon. And the last condition is we must have international guarantees, yeah, political, legal, and that this agreement will take place in these 2 stages with these conditions.
Do you agree with Pekka Haavisto that Egypt's rhetoric has not been helpful?
Excuse me? What did you say?
The foreign minister of Finland just said that Egypt's rhetoric has not been helpful. Do you agree with him?
Actually, what they have been agreeing with us is regarding the binding agreement.
No, the question is, do you agree that Egypt's rhetoric has been complicating matters rather than being helpful? That's the question, very specific.
Really, I didn't know what part of Egypt is not helpful, because when they were in the beginning, they were refusing to have these 2 stages. But when they met with us last week, only 4 days ago, they could see the point, and then they agreed to these 2 stages. So okay, maybe he's referring to the part when they were not agreeing to having this part, because it's also presented by the UN and presented by the African Union President.
Okay. Thank you very much. I need to go quickly to Joey Hood on this, the issue of the triangle and the dam, Nahda Dam, but make it very short because I have loads of questions, please. Joey Hood.
Oh, it will be very short because I just have general points to make on that. I mean, our seriousness on trying to help find a solution is represented by the presence of Ambassador Feltman, as you mentioned, because we understand the importance of the waters of the Nile to all 3 of those countries, and we're seeking a cooperative approach to support a comprehensive solution that's acceptable to all parties. And we will continue to do that through as quiet diplomacy as we can manage.
Okay. I want to go to Fyodor Lukyanov and go back again to the issue of what's happening possibly on the agenda. I don't even think there was a set agenda for the Biden-Putin meeting. I don't know whether the one was developed afterwards. I have no idea. But some sources have been talking about the possibility of discussing Iran from a very different point of view, by which Americans would like more of an intensive lobbying, if you will, by Russia with Iran, so that Iran can be cooperative much more, especially on the issue of giving security guarantees to Israel. Is Russia in a position to do that? Is this something you can extract from Iran, or is Russia willing to try to get security assurances or guarantees for Israel from Iran?
You know, first of all, I don't think that Israel will believe any security guarantees which would hypothetically come from Tehran. Just be realistic. It's another situation between those two nations. Secondly, a Russian-Iranian relationship is not linear and pretty complicated. It doesn't look like Iran just following what Moscow is saying, and vice versa. So it's a partnership, but partnership of two countries with extensively different interests, in particular in the Middle East, and even in Syria. In Syria, we are rather allies, but still there are different agendas. I think when it comes to Biden-Putin meeting, of course, the main issue in this regard might be this nuclear deal. I would not insist that this is number one on Russian agenda. So Russia, as it happened 2015, Russia can be helpful to facilitating something, but as at that time and even more now, this is a very much bilateral issue between Iran and the United States. We see how both sides are trying to actually narrow their position to approach each other, but they need to demonstrate as if they are not that interested or not more interested than the counterpart. So it's like this. So it's not Russian main objective.
Two things quickly. Do you agree with Joey Hood that there is a chance for American-Russian cooperation in Syria in the way that he described it, humanitarian-wise first to lead to other things? And the second question quickly is that what are President Putin's red lines in this meeting with President Biden? What are, if he was to be determined for Russia, what are the red lines? Can you say 1, 2, 3, 4? Go ahead, Fyodor Lukyanov.
As for Syria, I think we know very well that there is one area of, so to say, cooperation or interaction, which is very successful. This is a relationship between military persons, military people there. They are very careful not to provoke anything bad between Russia and the United States in Syria, and they are very successful in this. I'm not sure that humanitarian issue, which Joy mentioned, will be very forward-looking. So certainly on the Russian side, it's very much connected to the formal recognition of Damascus by Americans. And as for red lines, you know, we cannot expect any structured relationship to come out from this meeting. The absolute success of the meeting, as I see it, if it would happen, will be when Biden and Putin separately, because they will not have a common appearance, will say that we entrusted our experts, generals, diplomats to launch a comprehensive review of strategic stability issues, to start this program, to start this working group. That's it. That's the only way which can happen.
Okay, I was actually trying to see what are the red lines to be fixed, to be determined. You don't do this, you don't do that. Joey Hood, let me ask you about President Biden's potential red lines to President Putin. Here's what you cannot do because it will cost you. Can you just name them for me?
Well, Raghida, I think, as you know, I cover only the Middle East, and so that's what I'm qualified to talk about. So with regard to the Middle East, I think it's going to be, like I talked about with regard to Syria, with regard to continuing to the fight to defeat ISIS, and to just keep those ceasefire lines as frozen as they can be. As Fyodor said, our militaries have done a good job of deconflicting and making sure that there aren't flare-ups, and we need to continue to do that. Those are certainly some red lines in the Middle East. I think on the larger issues, you see the headlines just like I do with regard to the hacking that takes place from, we believe, from Russian territory, and some of the other activities that are just not acceptable to the United States. And I'm sure President Putin will hear all about those from President Biden.
So then I'll ask you specifically on the Caesars Act in Syria, back to Syria. Is there any consideration of lifting the Caesars Act, or is that something the administration cannot do? It's up to the Congress. And the other question that I'd like you to address is, what are you doing for when you're seeing in front of your eyes a country like Lebanon falling apart, collapsing, and even potentially the army falling apart? What is them, since you want to focus only, of course, on your dossier, could you address these 2 points quickly, if you don't mind?
Sure, thank you. Well, the Caesar Act is a law, and it has widespread bipartisan support in Congress. So I don't think it's likely that it's going to be overturned anytime soon. So the administration will follow that law. But just to remind you, that law is specifically focused on the regime and its supporters, and not on humanitarian assistance and things like that. And so that's where this administration is going to put a lot of its energy, to make sure that while we follow the law, we don't have unintended consequences on the humanitarian situation.
Right, but the supporters, I will get back to you on Lebanon, but when you say the regime and supporters, well, Russia is a huge supporter of the regime. I mean, you know, they will fall under, will there be application of the Caesars Act on Russia and on Lebanon? Lebanon is engaging, some parties in Lebanon are engaging very strongly with Syria. Can you?
Yeah, it's entirely possible. We encourage anyone that's contemplating a transaction with the regime, or that would somehow involve the regime, to seek legal counsel before they do it, because it could implicate and make impossible their interaction with the US financial system. And that's, if you're a business or a government, that can be very difficult for you if you run afoul of US sanctions.
When you have a lot of people from Lebanon engaging very seriously and on multiple levels, do you have that in mind, applying the Caesars Act on them and or the Magnitsky Act, which is
absolutely
different? Yeah, tell me.
Yes, anyone that has these transactions that are sanctionable should expect that we can and will come after them. So that's why I say I think anyone contemplating such a transaction needs to be absolutely sure that they seek legal counsel to be sure that their exposure doesn't put them at risk. But look, we don't do sanctions just for the sake of doing sanctions. We do sanctions to try to change behavior. And so if the Syrian regime were to change behavior and were to stop using chemical weapons against its own people, and all the other things that we know that Bashar and his supporters are guilty of, then you know, we could see a way forward to easing those sanctions. Again, we don't put sanctions on just for the joy of doing that. With regard to Lebanon, we have been just on a personal level and a professional level, we have been just horrified by what's happening there, with the collapse of the economy, the explosion in the port of Beirut. I mean, my God, what else could convince Lebanese leaders to get together and form a government that is capable of real reform and bringing services to its people, if not that massive explosion, which was on the scale of like a 3.5 magnitude earthquake. I was looking it up earlier today. It ranks among the top 10 biggest accidental explosions in history. What is the United States?
Joey Hood, do you have, I have not seen the FBI investigation results. Why are you withholding it?
I don't know the status of that, but what I do know.
It was done months ago. Why we don't know what the FBI investigation has concluded? I mean, this has been almost a year.
Well, those are issues that are sometimes dealt with bilaterally and sometimes involve intelligence matters, and so might not be something that we can share publicly. But what I can say publicly is that the Lebanese people deserve a government that is going to implement the necessary reforms to rescue the economy and to get services to the people. And that is not something that anyone in the world can do other than those leaders. While they are fiddling around, while Rome burns, in this case, or maybe Beirut, we are continuing to provide a huge amount of humanitarian assistance, and we're looking at ways to increase that. We are, of course, the biggest international donor in Lebanon. We've provided more than $5.5 billion since 2006, including to help the refugees.
Okay, thank you very much. I do have only 2 minutes left, and I'm going to give each ministers 1 minute to tell me what is it that you want to leave me with. I'm sorry that I have not had more time than this, but Europe has been really not paying attention to this part of the world, and now the United States is saying, yeah, you can. Pekka Haavisto, can we expect that you can do something different, whether it is via your position on Iran, which is very supportive of Iran and its activities, actually? Can you tell us something within a minute? What do you plan to do differently to stop the activities that reflect negatively on the issue of sovereignty of other countries, such as the sovereignty of Lebanon or Iraq or Syria, for that matter, and Yemen? Please, 1 minute only.
No, thank you. And first of all, very much following what Joy mentioned about the new role of US active engagement. And of course, we look quite a lot what could be done also together with Europe and US in the Middle East, addressing the problems that you have been reflecting in Lebanon and so forth. I'm really looking that this is a new era that is starting, and of course to find a way of the permanent solution with Iran and their development of the possible nuclear programs and others. If we can put a stop on that together, I think it's very, very crucial. Some issues have not been mentioned so deeply, like Yemen, and of course I think it's also time to find a political solution to Yemen, and Europe, of course, we are fully engaged and want to cooperate on that. I'm very happy to have a US back on all these issues on the international arena, also with the UN. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd love to have you again to discuss in more details what's Europe really doing actively, other than its, what I call probably obsession with the nuclear issue and leaving everything behind. And the last word to you, Madam Minister, and it's going to be in less than a minute. Please go ahead. Anything you want to give us with?
Thank you very much, Ms. Raghida, actually, for using the technology to put us together in the world to address important issues. But I think you already got your answer through the way the whole thing was being conducted. Stability has to be redefined with all the people, with all the voices. And of course, it's being well shown that is from at least from the perspective of this program, who is the author of the future.
Thank you so very much. It's such an honor to have both foreign ministers here with us together, and I'd love to have you back separately or together again, and to have this fantastic, engaging conversation with both Joey Hood and Fyodor Lukyanov as well. This was the 37th E-Policy Circle of Beirut Institute Summit in Abu Dhabi, which we pray will be held next March in Abu Dhabi. So please consider that an advanced invitation to all of you to give us the honor. Both co-chairs, my co-chair for the summit is His Royal Highness Prince Turki Faisal, who I'm sure is watching this, sends regards to you all and hopes to see you on the ground in Abu Dhabi when God permits and COVID allows. So thank you so very much. Have a wonderful afternoon. It's a great honor having you. I'm grateful. Thank you so very much. Take care now. Goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.